Rural schools in Massachusetts are asking the legislature for more state aid for their districts. Enrollment has fallen in rural areas, but fixed costs such as transportation have not. The Massachusetts Rural Schools Coalition visited the State House recently to urge lawmakers to act. And I sat down with Michael Buoniconti, the superintendent of both the Mohawk Trail Regional School District and the Hawlemont School District, to find out more.
Since the late 1990s, rural schools in Massachusetts, and people are surprised that there is a rural part of Massachusetts, frankly, because most of the state is either suburban or urban, but about 10% of the state in terms of population is made up of rural students, which is about 90,000 kids. This is about 900,000 students statewide in public schools. The funding, the formula is designed for that 90%. It's designed for the more populous parts of the state. A big part of that has to do with enrollment. So what's happened since the late 1990s is there's been a loss of population in the rural parts of the state, largely because manufacturing businesses have gone out of business and the jobs have left those areas, and with that, families with children have left the area. So over the past 20 years, where population has been going down in the rural parts of the state, we've seen the funding formula begin to fail for those rural areas because increases are based on students in the schools. So funding has been relatively flat for districts like Mohawk Trail and Hawlemont for the past 18 to 20 years. Meanwhile, actual costs have been going up. So we've been faced with this, with a double, sort of a whipsaw between increasing costs and flat funding, which has put more and more pressure on the local communities.
All right, because you still have fixed costs, you still have buildings, you still have to heat, and all of those things as the enrollment is dipping.
So this gets to another factor that's in rural areas. Mohawk, for example, is 250 square miles. There's 9 towns up there. It's a big space. So you have four elementary schools now that are populated throughout that area. So economies of scale is, I guess, is the opposite of what we experience there. So reducing costs to move in proportion to funding just isn't possible. So because we've got kids on buses now an hour each way going to and from school.
Which is a long time.
It already is a long time. So the closing of schools itself isn't going to solve the problem.
So tell me a little bit about the foundation budget formula and how that works with the Chapter 70 funds. Like, how does the state fill in the gaps?
Are you asking about the new proposal?
The new proposal, yes.
All right, so the Foundation Budget Review Commission got together and back in 2015 and made some major recommendations that impacted increasing funding based on healthcare costs that have gone up, based on English language learner populations that have increased, and actual special education costs. All of those things are important, and those affect all of the school districts across the Commonwealth, but they don't address the issues peculiar to the rural areas. So even if the entire recommendation were adopted, the governor's is about halfway there. Even if the entire $2 billion a year recommendation were adopted, it wouldn't resolve the fundamental issue in rural areas. We would still be unsustainable. It would just buy us more time, but 10, 15 years from now, we'd be in the same predicament that we're in right now.
So explain a little bit about what you would like to see. I know that the Rural Schools Coalition has a proposal as well. Is that something that you find that would be more helpful?
Right. So we the rural schools, founded ourselves in 2016 when we realized that no one was coming to save the day. We were going to have to advocate for ourselves. So a group of superintendents, largely from the Franklin County area, got together. And we've been looking at a number of models, but if you look across the country, there's ones that, the model that we think would make the most sense and is the most understandable is the Wisconsin model. It's called sparsity aid there. But it's fundamentally the same thing that we're looking for here. It is a factor, it's a level of funding per student in rural districts that makes up for the gap, which is really a function of our lack of economy of scale.
So specifically, how would it work, and how much money are you talking?
Well, the recommendation that we've asked for is $400 per student, which is based on the current model in Wisconsin. That would cost approximately $15 million across the entire Commonwealth, which in the scope of a multi-billion-dollar education budget is really kind of a drop in the bucket, budget dust, if you will.
And what's the response that you've been getting from lawmakers?
Well, the legislators, we have really a wonderful group of legislators in Western Massachusetts. And Senator Adams Hines is a relatively new senator from our area who's really been a go-getter to help us move this forward. Last year, 2 years ago, he helped pass a law just to have the Department of Education study us. Just getting a voice and recognition has been a struggle in itself. But that was a great first step. And then the following year, he led the charge on establishing sparsity aid, which was at $1.5 million. It's tenfold less than what we're asking for, but it has kept the ball rolling. So his voice, among others, we have some newer voices up north: Senator Comerford, Representative Blay, who have really started to pick up the ball for us. And I guess an indicator that I can look at is we went to Boston on February 28th, did our own rural schools, a rural day on the Hill. And we were in a room about this size, I would say. It was a pretty decent-sized room. And the room was full. We had representatives, students, and people from roughly 6 or 7 districts. And this was a snowy day, so the turnout was good despite bad weather. But we had, there had to have been at least 15 legislators that were in the room from both the House and the Senate side. And they were gracious with their time after that initial sort of a kickoff event, and we met in particular with the Senate Education Subcommittee, who has a new chair, Senator Jason Lewis, and I found him to be very receptive. He's from an urban area, from the Malden area, but he was very receptive to what's going on across the board in Massachusetts. So we have voice and attention that we've never had before.
So you said you had you have 4 elementary schools in the Mohawk district, is that correct?
Right.
So some people might say, you don't need 4 elementary schools. Why don't you just combine into one? And that would certainly save money. Yes, the kids might be on the bus a little bit longer, but there you go. There's where you start to save your costs right there. How many kids are in each school?
So our largest school is 300 students at Buckland Shelburne Elementary School. And then our smallest school is Coleraine Central, that has about 120 students. So the answer to that, though, again goes back to 250 square miles. Is it reasonable, is it responsible to put a kindergartner on the bus for an hour and a half each way, 3 hours per day? No.
And I'm sure you're hearing that from parents as well.
Right. Well, not just parents. Really, it's just common sense. The older students we can put on the bus for a longer period of time, and we do, but we're already at the outer edge of what's reasonable.
Okay, and how is this affecting, I guess, achievement in school? Is that something, obviously, as superintendent, you're certainly concerned about all of those issues?
Well, it's been a slow strangulation because of the funding issue. So, over time, you're whittling away at the quality of the product that you can offer to the students. And we're trying to get in front of that before it becomes a crisis. And this is part of my argument with the Department of Education is, just from a pure financial perspective, you can wait until we're all in a disaster zone. It's going to cost you 10 times more than to just help us up front so that we can get in front of this. So it makes good financial sense.